There is a hillside in northern Israel where the grass still grows down to the water. And 2,000 years ago, a crowd climbed it, expecting a revolution. You can stand on that slope today. It rises gently above the Sea of Galilee. And the wind still comes up off the lake, the way it did that spring morning when they gathered. Farmers who were paying taxes to a temple and taxes to an empire, and going hungry under the weight of both. Sick people carried on mats from as far away as Syria, and scattered through the crowd, men with daggers under their cloaks, because this region had already buried one failed uprising and was aching for another one that might succeed. They climbed that hill because of a rumor. Maybe this was him. Maybe this was the one. And every soul on that slope knew the old script by heart. When a deliverer goes up a mountain, he comes down with something that changes everything. Moses went up a mountain and came down with a covenant. So what would this carpenter bring down? A declaration of war. A declaration of independence. He sat down, the way a rabbi sits when what he is about to say is official. The crowd went quiet, and the first full sentence out of his mouth was a blessing on people who are spiritually bankrupt. Not the strong, not the winners, not one word about Rome. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Picture the silence on that hillside. Somewhere in the crowd, a man with a dagger under his cloak felt his stomach drop. He was not finished. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the persecuted. 8 blessings in a row, each one landing on exactly the kind of person this world steps over. 8 hammer strikes on everything his audience believed about who is winning at life. Nobody clapped. There is no verse that says they cheered. How could they? Every single line was aimed at the one thing they had all brought up the mountain with them, the scoreboard in their heads. Now, before we walk through those 8 sentences, you need to know something about the word he kept repeating, because we have done something strange to it. The word is makarios. It is the word your Bible translates as blessed, and in the Greek-speaking world of that day, it was a status word. It described the gods, beings above the struggle, needing nothing, intouchable. It described the ultra-rich in their coastal villas. Makarios was a word that lived at the top of the tower, and this carpenter picked up the word from the top of the tower and hung it around the necks of the people at the bottom. The broke, the grieving, the steamrolled. He did it 8 times, out loud, in public, like a man walking through the marketplace of human status and repricing everything on the shelves. 2,000 years later, look what we did with his word. Blessed. It is a hashtag now. Scroll through it tonight and see what comes up. The new kitchen, the beach vacation, the promotion, the ring, the graduation. We took the exact word Jesus used and stuck it back on the exact things he left off the list. The word got kidnapped and carried right back up the tower. So this story exists to take the 8 sentences back. And here is the deal we are going to make. You and I. For the next hour or so, each of these 8 blessings carries a demand, a real cost, something it asks you to hand over. Each one also carries a promise, and the promises are stranger and better than the greeting card versions. 8 demands, 8 promises. That is 16. But there is a 17th thing hiding inside this sermon. Something these 8 sentences are quietly building the whole time. And you will only see it at the end of the road. When you turn around and look back at where you have walked, I am not going to tell you what it is. I am going to show you where it has been standing. One more thing, and hold on to this one. because it is the question underneath everything. These 8 sentences are not spoken like theory. Listen to them closely, and they sound like testimony. The man on that hillside talks about spiritual poverty and grief and being hated, like someone describing country he has personally walked through. Why does he speak like a man who knows every one of these from the inside? Keep that question. Do not put it down. The road starts in a place nobody wants to start. It starts at the bottom. And there is a man in our own century sitting at that exact starting point right now, in a parked car, outside a church, and he cannot make himself go in. The doors are unlocked. That is not the problem. The problem is what he cannot carry through them. It is Sunday morning in America, and a man is sitting in his car in a church parking lot, watching other families walk in. The engine is off. His coffee has gone cold in the cup holder. From the outside, this man is a portfolio with legs, good job, good marriage, kids who behave in restaurants. He serves on a team at this church. He is the guy people call when their lives fall apart. The steady one. The one with the verse ready and the calm voice. And for the last 6 months, his inside has been an empty house. He prays, and the words dissolve before they reach the ceiling. He reads his Bible like a man reading the phone book. Something in him has gone quiet, and he cannot find the switch. But he has never told a living soul, because his entire identity in that building is built on being okay. So he does what he does every Sunday. He flips down the visor, checks his face in the mirror, and puts on the expression he will wear through the lobby. If you have been with this channel for a while, you know what that face is. It is the lobby face. I'm fine. We're good. Busy, but good. He's about to walk in there and perform solvency one more time. Now, set that man next to the first sentence Jesus ever preached on that hillside. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The whole kingdom opens with the word poor, which should stop us cold. Why would the first step of the greatest sermon in history go down instead of up? The answer is hiding in the Greek, and it is sharper than any English translation lets on. Greek had 2 words for poor, and they were not interchangeable. The first was penes. That word described the working poor, the man who owned nothing extra but earned his bread. Calloused hands, tired back, still standing on his own feet. There was dignity in penes. If Jesus had wanted to bless people who were humble but holding it together, penes was sitting right there. He did not use it. Matthew records the other word, patogos, and tochos comes from a root that means to crouch, to cower, to fold in on yourself. It is the word for the beggar in the dirt, the person with nothing left to sell, nothing left to trade, no move remaining except an open hand. Pennies has a little something, tochos has nothing at all. Blessed are the tochos in spirit. Blessed are the ones who have gone spiritually broke and have finally stopped pretending otherwise. Let me be careful here, because this sentence has been twisted into some ugly shapes over the centuries. Jesus is not blessing self-hatred. He is not asking you to grovel, or to perform worthlessness, or to open every prayer by listing your failures like a man reading charges against himself. Some of the most spiritually bankrupt people you will ever meet are outwardly confident, and some of the truest tochos hearts belong to people who are strong, capable, and clear-eyed everywhere else in their lives. This is not about your posture in a room full of people. It is about your currency in a room with God. Because here is what the first beatitude actually confronts. We are a resume culture. From childhood, Americans are trained never to show up anywhere empty-handed. The college application needs achievements. The job interview needs strengths. The dating profile needs highlights. Present your value. Prove your worth. Earn your place. It is the water we swim in, and most of us have stopped noticing it is water. And then we carry that training straight into the presence of God. We show up to prayer with a portfolio. Look at my church attendance. Look at my serving, my giving, my quiet time streak, the ministry I run, the people who call me when their lives fall apart. We are not always asking God for things. A lot of the time we are quietly showing him our resume, hoping the numbers are good enough to keep our account open. The first beatitude takes that resume out of your hands and drops it in the shredder. The kingdom of heaven has a strange door policy. The only people who get in are the ones who arrive with nothing. Because arriving with nothing is the only honest way to arrive. Your resume was never currency in that room. It was always a costume. The man in the parking lot knows something is wrong, but he has misdiagnosed it. He thinks his emptiness is the problem. He thinks he has to fix the emptiness before he can come back to God. Refill the account, get the numbers up, and then walk in the door as the man everybody believes he is. And the first beatitude says the exact opposite. The emptiness is not what disqualifies him. The emptiness is the entry ticket. The kingdom does not open to the man who finally got his balance back. It opens to the man who admits the account was always empty, even in the years it looked full. So here is the first demand, and every demand in this sermon costs something real. Put down the portfolio, come with empty hands, and let them be seen. Stop performing solvency for God, and stop performing it for at least one other human being. That last part is where it gets expensive, because empty hands in private are hard enough. Empty hands in the lobby cost you the reputation. And here is the first promise. And do not rush past the grammar, because the grammar is the gift, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Is present tense. Read the other blessings, and you will find they shall be comforted. They shall inherit. They shall be filled. Promises with a horizon on them. But the first blessing and the last one both come stamped with the word is. The poor in spirit are not put on a waiting list. There is no probation period. No review of the application. The moment the hands open, the kingdom is already theirs. The door was never locked from God's side. It was held shut from ours, by the weight of everything we insisted on carrying through it. One small detail before we leave this chapter, and I will just set it down and keep moving. The man who preached this sentence owned almost nothing. He said of himself that foxes have dens and birds have nests, but he had no place to lay his head. And the record shows a curious habit. Long before sunrise, again and again, he would slip away alone to pray on a mountainside, like a man who began every single morning with open hands, asking for the day the way a beggar asks for bread. Just hold that. We keep going. The kingdom does not begin when you finally prove you are strong enough. It begins when you no longer need to pretend. But the moment a person stops pretending, something dangerous happens, and nobody warns you about it. All the grief you were holding down under the performance starts coming up. The losses you never mourned because you were too busy being okay. And the second beatitude is standing exactly there. On the one piece of ground our whole culture has fenced off with a warning sign. There is a woman standing on that ground right now. It is 3 weeks after the funeral, and the world has just run out of patience with her tears. It is 3 weeks after the funeral, and a woman is standing in her own living room, holding a sympathy card she cannot make herself read. 3 weeks is the cruelest milestone on the calendar of grief, and nobody tells you that in advance. The flowers have died. The casseroles her neighbors carried over have run out. The text messages that used to arrive every morning, thinking of you, praying for you, have slowed to a trickle and then gone quiet. The world has packed up its condolences and gone back to its schedule, and everyone around her has silently agreed on a deadline she never signed. She should be coming out of it by now. That is the phrase, coming out of it, as if grief were a parking garage, and she has learned the vocabulary people use when your sorrow starts making them uncomfortable. He is in a better place. God needed another angel. Everything happens for a reason. Stay strong. She has heard every one of them, delivered with kind eyes and a hand on her shoulder. And she has learned what they actually mean underneath. They mean, please hurry up and heal. Because your sadness is standing in the room like a piece of furniture nobody knows where to put. Even church can do this. Church, which of all places on earth should be fluent in tears, will sometimes slap Romans 8:28 over a wound that is still bleeding, quoting, "All things work together for good," to a woman whose husband has been gone for 21 days. True verse, wrong moment. A bandage applied at highway speed. Now carry that woman up the hillside in Galilee. And listen to the second sentence. The carpenter speaks over the crowd. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Of the 8 blessings, this is the one that sounds most like a contradiction. Wearing a robe, blessed are the happy. We could understand. Blessed are the healed, but blessed are the mourners. By every scoreboard the human race has ever kept, the mourners are the ones losing. The Greek word tells you how serious he was. The language of that day had a whole shelf of words for sorrow, ranging from a private ache all the way up. The word Matthew records is penthine, and penthine sits at the top of the shelf. It is the strongest grief word Greek had. It means the kind of mourning that cannot be hidden anymore. Sorrow that breaks the surface. Loss that comes out audibly, publicly. The wailing at a graveside. Jesus reached past every polite word for sadness and blessed the loudest one. And the people on that hillside heard more in it than we do, because their scriptures had taught them that mourning ran 3 layers deep. There was mourning for the dead, the graveside kind, the kind that woman in the living room knows. There was mourning for the world, the prophets weeping over a whole society that had wandered off the road, injustice in the gates, the poor crushed in the courts, and there was mourning for yourself. The grief of looking at your own sin without flinching, the kind David knew on the floor of his palace. 3 layers, 1 word. This beatitude is bigger than funerals. It is about a capacity, the capacity to look directly at what is broken in your life and in this world, and refuse to reach for the anesthetic, because that is what this blessing is actually up against. We are the most medicated culture in human history. And I do not only mean pharmacies. We have built a $1 trillion economy around the promise that you never have to feel anything for longer than 8 seconds. Endless streaming. A phone that refills itself every time you pull the screen like a slot machine lever. A calendar packed so tight there is no silence left for the grief to surface in. We are not a culture that processes pain. We are a culture that schedules over it. Somebody needs to say the quiet part. Half of what we call busy is really just anesthesia with a to-do list. And a word of care here, because this channel does not romanticize suffering, and it never will. Jesus is not saying pain is good. He is not calling depression a blessing. And he is not telling that widow her loss was secretly a gift. Hear the difference. The blessing is not the wound. The blessing is the promise attached to the wound, that sorrow will not get the last word. And if your grief has moved into your body and taken up residence, if the sleep is wrecked and the appetite is gone, and it has been months, then seeing a doctor is also an act of faith. We stood under the broom tree with Elijah in another story, and we watched God treat a collapsing servant with food and rest before anything else. That has not changed. So what does this beatitude demand? It demands that you stop numbing. Name what you lost, out loud, with its real name. Grieve what sin has cost you instead of managing your image around it. Let the tears of this world reach you. The news story you usually scroll past. The co-worker whose eyes are red in the break room. And when you sit with someone in their loss, resist the itch to fix them. Mourning with the mourners means your presence does the talking and your explanations stay home. The second demand. Then, feel it all the way down. Refuse the anesthetic. And the promise, they shall be comforted. The Greek runs deeper than the English lets on. The word is built from kaleo, to call, and para, alongside. To be comforted, in this sentence, is to have someone called to your side. Hold on to that. Because at the end of his life, Jesus reached for the same root when he named the Holy Spirit. Parakletos, the one called alongside. Do you see what is being promised on that hillside? Not an explanation. Explanations are what the neighbors offer, and they land like empty boxes. What God promises the mourner is a presence. The world says sorry for your loss and takes a step back. Heaven hears the mourning and moves closer. One small thing before this chapter closes, and I will just leave it here on the table. The shortest verse in the entire English Bible sits in the middle of a funeral scene. In a village called Bethany. 2 words, Jesus wept. And the strange part, the part scholars have circled for centuries, is that he wept knowing he was minutes away from calling the dead man out of the tomb. The miracle was already in his hands, and he stood at the grave with the mourners and cried real tears anyway. Apparently, tears are not a failure of faith, even when you know how the story ends. Just hold that. We keep moving. Comfort is not promised to the people who never break. It is promised to the people who stop pretending nothing is broken. But there is a strength that grows in exactly that broken ground. And it is the most misread strength in the entire Bible. The world cannot even get its name right. To find it, we have to leave the quiet of the living room. Because, in our century, this next blessing gets tested in a much louder place. It is 11 at night in America. A man is staring at a glowing screen. His reply is typed, and it is perfect. And his thumb is hovering over one button. The button says, send. The house is dark, except for one blue-lit face at the kitchen table. And the man wearing it has just finished writing the best paragraph of his life. It started this afternoon. A comment aimed at him in front of everyone. Public, unfair, and wrong on the facts. He knows it is wrong because he has the receipts. And for the last 40 minutes, he has been assembling them into a reply. And the reply is a masterpiece. It is precise. It is documented. It is devastating. It corrects the record and humiliates the man who smeared him, both at once. And every mutual acquaintance watching from the bleachers will see him win. He reads it one more time. His thumb drifts over the send button. Frees him right there. Thumb in the air. Because 2,000 years ago, on a hillside, above a lake, a sentence was spoken for exactly this moment. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, before anything else, we have to rescue that word. Because meek might be the most mistranslated word in American religion. Say it out loud and listen to what your own ear does with it. Meek. It sounds one letter away from weak. And that is precisely how this country hears it. Doormat. Pushover. The person with no spine and no opinions, who loses every negotiation and apologizes to furniture. Nobody in America wants to be meek. We have entire industries teaching people how not to be. But the man who spoke this blessing was not describing weakness. And the Bible itself proves it. Because Scripture hangs this exact word on exactly one man as a description. And the man it chose demolishes the doormat theory forever. The book of Numbers, chapter 12, says Moses was the meekest man on the face of the earth. Moses. Run the resume. This is the man who walked into the throne room of the most powerful empire alive and told Pharaoh to his face, "Let my people go." The man who came down a mountain and shattered the tablets of the law. The man who stood in the gap when the wrath of heaven was aimed at a rebellious nation and argued God back. Point to the weakness anywhere in that file. There is none. Whatever meek means, it does not mean soft. So look at where the Bible drops the word. Because the placement is the definition. Numbers 12 is the chapter where Moses gets attacked. And this time, it is not Pharaoh. It is his own brother and his own sister, Aaron and Miriam, going after him publicly, undermining his leadership in front of the whole camp. And Moses, the most powerful man in that nation, the man with the standing to crush them both with a word, says nothing, not one syllable in his own defense. He absorbs it, stays silent, and lets God handle the vindication. And God does. Swiftly. While Moses does something even more remarkable. He prays for the sister who wounded him. That is the word. That is praus. The Greek term in this beatitude, it has never meant the absence of power. It means power under a decision. Strength that has the weapon in its hand, has every right to use it, and lays it down. The meek man is not the man who cannot strike. He is the man who could end the argument with one blow and chooses not to swing. Meekness is might that has decided it does not need a victim. Now hold that definition up against the country we live in. Because the collision is loud, we have built an economy that pays out rage like a slot machine. The algorithms that decide what you see tonight were trained on one discovery. That anger keeps human beings scrolling longer than any other emotion. So, the loudest voice gets the largest room. We call it engagement. We have taught 2 generations that decibels equal courage, that the clapback is a life skill, that if you do not grab yours, somebody else will. Winning the argument is the closest thing this culture has to a sacrament. And into that noise, The carpenter says the earth is not going to the loud ones. It will be inherited by the people who refused to seize it. He was not inventing the line. By the way, he was quoting, and the crowd on the hillside knew it. Psalm 37, a song of David, says, "The meek shall inherit the land." And that psalm is a whole meditation on this exact frustration, the fury you feel watching aggressive people win. Fret not because of evildoers. David writes, "They will wither like grass." And history has spent 20 centuries grading that claim. Rome, the empire whose boots were standing on that very hillside, the superpower that ruled by crucifixion, is a ruin now. Tourists pay admission to walk through what is left of it. And the sermon preached under its occupation is being read tonight, on every continent, in your language. In this one, the Caesars hold territory for a season. They have never once managed to keep it. Let me put up the guardrails, because this beatitude gets abused too. Meekness is not silence in the face of injustice done to others. Moses went silent for his own honor and roared like a lion for the enslaved. It is not the absence of conviction, and it is not letting evil run the room. The question meekness asks is narrower and more painful. When the insult is aimed at you, when the weapon is in your hand, when you are right and you can prove it, and the crowd is watching, what do you do with your power then? So here is the third demand, and it might cost more than the first two combined. Lay down the right to retaliate, even when you are right, especially when you are right, because being right is what loads the weapon. Let some records get set straight by God instead of by you. For the man at the kitchen table, the demand has a shape, and the shape is a thumb moving away from the send button. A paragraph deleted. A masterpiece nobody will ever read. And no applause for the hardest thing he has done all year. And the promise? They shall inherit the earth. Read the verb closely. Inherit. Nobody fights for an inheritance. An inheritance is not seized at the point of a sword. It is received from a father's hand, given to sons and daughters because of whose they are. The aggressive grab and lose. The meek receive and keep. It is the difference between looting a house and being handed the deed. One more detail, and I will set it down gently and move on. In all four Gospels, there is exactly one place where the man preaching this sermon describes his own heart. One place, he says, "Learn from me." And of every word in his vocabulary, the word he reaches for is this one. Praus. I am meek, he says, and lowly in heart. File that away. Keep walking. The meek do not inherit the earth by seizing it. They inherit what the violent spend their whole lives destroying. And now, look back at the road for a second, because something is happening. Poor in spirit put down the resume. The mourners put down the anesthetic. The meek put down the weapon. 3 blessings in. And every single one has been about emptying your hands. By this point, on the hillside, the hands are completely open, holding nothing at all. And that is exactly when a strange thing happens. A thing nobody warns you about. Empty hands start to ache. The open space starts to growl. Emptiness. It turns into appetite. The only question left is what that appetite is for. And the 4th blessing hangs on the answer. Because there is a woman in a conference room right now, discovering that a person's hunger for what is right can quietly die, one swallowed objection at a time. Before we meet the woman in the conference room, you need to hear the fourth blessing with first-century ears, because our ears are broken for this one. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. When an American hears the word hunger, he thinks of a missed lunch, a rumble in the stomach around 2 in the afternoon, an inconvenience with a drive-through solution. We are the first people in the history of the world for whom hunger is a mild event. The people on that hillside heard something else entirely. A Galilean farmer lived one bad harvest away from watching his children eat less. Many of the bodies sitting on that grass had known real hunger, the kind that moves in and stays, the kind with a name and a face. And thirst was worse. In that country, a traveler caught in the wrong ravine without water was dead in 2 days. And everyone knew someone it had happened to. When Jesus said hunger and thirst, nobody on that hillside heard a metaphor about mild interest. They heard survival. They heard the body screaming for the one thing it cannot live without. And the grammar sharpens it further. The verbs are present tense, continuous. Blessed are those who are hungering, who are thirsting, right now, ongoing, an ache that does not quit. Jesus is describing people who want righteousness the way a drowning man wants air, which raises the obvious question. Righteousness. What exactly is on the menu? The Greek word is dikaiosina, and it is far bigger than the church-sized word we made of it. Say righteousness in America today, and people picture private morality, clean habits, a scrubbed personal record. That is in the word, but it is the smallest room in the house. The crowd on the hillside heard the Hebrew concept underneath it, tzedakah. And tzedakah means everything standing in its right place. Right with God, right between neighbors, scales that are not thumbed, courts that cannot be bought. Workers paid what they earned, the weak not eaten by the strong. To hunger for dikaiosine is to ache for a world set back in order, and to ache for it, starting with the disordered rooms inside your own chest. Now walk into the conference room. There is a woman sitting at a long table on the 11th floor of an office building, and she has just noticed something in the numbers. It is small. That is the problem. It is so small. A billing adjustment applied to one of the firm's smallest clients. A rounding decision that always rounds one direction. A fee described in language designed not to be read. It is the kind of thing an auditor would need a lucky day to find. Speaking up would cost the account. And accounts have names attached to them. And one of the names is hers. 10 years ago, fresh out of school, this woman would have been on fire about it. She remembers that younger version of herself. The one who argued about ethics over cheap coffee. The one who believed the point of the work was to do it clean. And sitting at that table, she performs a quiet audit of her own soul and finds something missing. The fire is not there. The anger she expects to feel arrives as a shrug. Somewhere across 10 years of small, swallowed objections, one compromise at a time. One look away at a time. Her appetite for what is right has been dying, and she never felt it die. That is the terror hiding inside the fourth beatitude, and almost nobody preaches it. A moral appetite can starve to death quietly. Taste buds die from disuse. The conscience does not usually go down in one dramatic fall. It goes numb, the way a foot goes numb, gradually, painlessly, until you stand up one day and discover you cannot feel the floor. And our culture has produced a counterfeit hunger to fill the space. and the counterfeit is thriving. Call it selective outrage. It is a ferocious appetite for the sins of other people. It scrolls all evening, feasting on the exposure of enemies, the downfall of the other side, the daily video of someone terrible getting what they deserve. It feels exactly like a hunger for justice. It has the same heat in the chest, and it costs nothing. That is how you spot the fake. The counterfeit is always hungry for someone else's repentance. The real thing starts with its own menu. The person who truly hungers for righteousness wants it even when it disrupts their own comfort, their own contract, their own account with a name attached. Here is the strangest mercy in this whole beatitude, and somebody listening tonight needs it. Jesus does not bless the people who have achieved righteousness. Read it again. He blesses the people who are starving for it, which means that ache you carry, the gap you feel between the person you are and the person you know you should be, the thing you call falling short. That ache is not your disqualification. On this hillside, the ache is the blessing. The dangerous person in this sermon is not the one who is hungry. It is the one who is full of himself, satisfied with his own record. No appetite at all. You cannot feed a person who insists he has already eaten. So the fourth demand: get your appetite back. Want what is right more than what is easy. And start in the rooms only you can see. For the woman on the 11th floor, the demand has a shape, and the shape is a hand raised in a meeting, a question asked out loud about a small number, and a career that just got more complicated because her conscience came back from the dead. And the promise, for they shall be filled. The Greek word is hortastesontai, and it is a farm word. The word for livestock fed until they want nothing more. Filled to the bottom. Satisfied completely. It is almost comic. The earthiness of it. Jesus looked at every substitute meal humanity has ever tried. Money, applause, pleasure, power, all the food that leaves you hungrier. And he promised that this one appetite, fed, actually ends in satisfaction. Everything else you have ever binged on left you empty. This is the one hunger with a bottom to it. One small detail, and I will just set it on the table and keep moving. There was a noon hour, years into his ministry, when the man who preached this blessing sat down, exhausted beside a well in Samaria, hungry and thirsty in the plainest sense. While his friends went to town for food, they came back and found him refreshed, and they had not seen anyone feed him. And he said something they wrote down because they could not make sense of it. My food, he said, is to do the will of him who sent me. As if, for this one man, righteousness was not an obligation. It was the meal itself. Hold that. Keep walking. Jesus never asks whether righteousness interests you. He asks whether you want it the way a dying man wants water. But the hunger for what is right has a cliff edge right beside it. And many people have gone over. The person who hungers for righteousness, left uncorrected, curdles into the person who hunts unrighteousness. In everyone else, the prosecutor is born, and the fifth blessing stands exactly at that cliff edge, holding the one question no honest human being escapes. It is waiting at a holiday table in November, where two brothers are about to sit at opposite ends of the same room, and not look at each other, for the fourth straight year. It is Thanksgiving in America, and the turkey is perfect. And there is a demilitarized zone running down the middle of the dining room table. Two brothers sit at opposite ends. They have not spoken in 4 years, not since the months after their mother's funeral, when the settling of her small estate turned into a war over things that were never really about the things: the house, the lake property, who cared for her at the end, and who only showed up for the will. Words got said that year that had been loading for decades. And then the phone calls stopped. The rest of the family has adapted, the way families do. Seating charts are drawn with military care. Conversations are steered around the silence like traffic around a crater. Everyone has learned to set the table around a wound. And the younger brother has a folder on his phone. Screenshots. Every text from the estate fight. Every voicemail transcript. Organized. Backed up. Preserved like evidence for a trial that is never coming. Some nights, when the house is quiet, he opens the folder and reads through it again, and feels the old heat rise in his chest. And it feels almost like being alive. The English language has a phrase for what he is doing, and the phrase is accidentally brilliant. We say a person is nursing a grudge. Nursing, as in feeding, as in keeping something alive that would otherwise die. Nobody nurses a thing by accident. A grudge survives on scheduled feedings. The reread screenshot. The rehearsed argument in the shower, the retelling at every holiday. And whatever gets fed grows. Now carry that man up the hillside. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Notice the shape of this blessing before anything else, because it is the only one of the 8 built like a mirror. The poor in spirit receive a kingdom. The mourners receive comfort. But the merciful receive back the very thing they gave. What flows out is what flows in. And notice where it sits in the sequence. 5th, past the halfway mark. And that placement is not an accident either. Mercy could not have come earlier. Only a person who has already gone bankrupt in chapter 2 and been fed in chapter 5 has anything in the account to give. Mercy is not a loan you float from an empty account. It is overflow. The order of the sermon is telling you where the supply comes from. Now the word itself, because underneath the Greek sits a Hebrew word the whole crowd would have felt in their bodies. The deep Old Testament word for mercy is racham, and racham shares its root with rechem, the Hebrew word for the womb. Sit with that a moment. In the language of the Bible, mercy is not a legal maneuver or a shrug of dismissal. It is womb feeling. It is the physical lurch a mother feels toward her child in trouble. Compassion that starts below the ribs. An ache that moves toward the person in the wreckage, even when the person in the wreckage is the person who caused yours. And right here, I have to build a guardrail, and I am going to build it carefully, because real people get hurt when this beatitude is preached carelessly. Mercy does not mean pretending. Justice does not matter. The loudest voice for justice in the entire Bible and the deepest well of mercy in the entire Bible belong to the same God. And he has never once seen a contradiction in it. Mercy does not mean the wound was small. And it does not mean telling a victim to walk back into danger. If someone in your life is unsafe, hear this plainly. Forgiveness and access are 2 different things. And God does not require the second to honor the first. It helps to picture 3 doors. The first door is forgiveness, and it is the only one you can open alone, from your side, regardless of what the other person ever does. The second door is reconciliation, and it takes 2. It cannot be opened without truth spoken and truth received. The third door is restored trust, and that one has to be rebuilt slowly, plunk by plunk. earned, and in some cases, for your own safety. That third door should stay locked. The fifth beatitude is about the first door. Nobody on that hillside is asking you to tear down your boundaries. You are being asked to dismantle the missile launcher behind them. So what does opening that first door actually cost? Here is the arithmetic nobody wants. The reason forgiveness never feels fair. When a debt is forgiven, any debt, money or blood, the debt does not evaporate. It gets absorbed. Somebody still pays. And the person who forgives is the person who agrees to pay the remainder, alone, with no refund. That is why forgiveness always feels like a loss. Because in the narrow ledger, it is won. It is a conscious decision to eat a cost someone else ran up. And that is exactly why it is bigger than fairness. Fairness balances the books. Mercy closes them. And the man with the folder should know what the alternative costs. Because the alternative has a price tag too. Just quieter. Every month, he keeps the grudge on life support. The estate fight gets another vote in who he is becoming. The bitterness is not staying in the folder. It is leaking into how he reads every slight at work, every silence from his wife, every ambiguous glance. An unforgiven wound gets promoted, slowly, into a personality. Resentment is the strangest prison ever built. The cell where the prisoner holds the key and calls the holding strength. So the fifth demand: delete the folder. Stop the feedings. Give the mercy you once begged to receive. And give it first in the smallest available form, which might be nothing more than a text message that says, "I don't want it to be like this anymore." And the fifth promise, the mirror: they shall receive mercy. There is a day on every human calendar when you will stand in desperate need of mercy yourself, from people you have wounded, and from the God who watched you do it. The measure you have been using will be the measure waiting for you. Jesus said that plainly. Later, in this same sermon, and it should raise the hair on our arms. One small detail, and I will set it down without comment. The way we have been doing, history preserved very few words spoken by condemned men during Roman executions. The pain generally took language away first. But there is a record of one man who, while the nails were actually being driven, was heard praying out loud. And the prayer was for the soldiers swinging the hammers. "Father, forgive them. Present tense. While it was happening, leave it there. Keep moving." Mercy never says the wound was small. Mercy says the wound will not be given the final vote on who you become. Now, underneath everything we have walked through tonight, underneath the mercy and the hunger and the laid-down weapon, there is a floor-level question we have not asked yet. And the sixth blessing asks nothing else. Who, exactly, is doing all of this? Because there is the person everyone sees. And then there is the person who exists when the door closes and the screen glows and no one on earth is watching. There is a man in this country tonight who is 4 different people. And he is so tired, not from doing wrong, from running 4 versions of himself at once. The next blessing looks straight at him, and straight at us, and asks the only question left. When no one is watching, who are you? There is a man in this country who is 4 different people, and he could tell you the exact borders of each one. There is the LinkedIn version, polished, driven, fluent in the language of results. There is the Instagram version, the lake trips, the smiling kids, The golden hour photos with the hashtag underneath. Blessed. There is the church version. Hands raised at the right moments in worship. God is good. Brother. Quick, with a promise to pray for you, and sometimes he even does. And then there is the one in the morning version. The man, alone, in a dark room with a glowing screen, in a place none of the other three would recognize. Doing and watching and scrolling through things the other three have agreed never to mention. Here is what makes this man worth your attention. He is not a cartoon hypocrite. He is not faking any of the four. He means the worship on Sunday. He loves those kids in the photos. Every version is sincere while he is wearing it. The problem is quieter and much scarier than hypocrisy. He has been managing these four selves for so long, switching costumes so smoothly, that somewhere along the way, he lost track of which one is actually him. And he is tired, bone tired, soul tired. And when he finally sits still long enough to ask why, the answer surprises him. He is not tired from doing bad things. He is tired the way a stage actor is tired. It costs a fortune in energy to run four people on one heart. Now carry that exhausted man up the hillside, because the sixth blessing was spoken directly over his life. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Everything hangs on that word pure, and the word has been hijacked. Say purity in an American church, and one topic fills the room. And it is always the same topic. A whole generation grew up hearing this beatitude preached as though Jesus was speaking only about sexual behavior. Purity rings and pledge cards. One drawer of the dresser. That drawer is real, and it belongs in the conversation. But the word Jesus used is enormously bigger, and its home base is not the courtroom or the bedroom. Its home base is the marketplace. The word is katharos, and in the first century it was a workshop word, a farm word, a merchant's word. Gold was katharos when the smelter had burned every other metal out of it. Nothing in the bar but gold. Wine was katharos when no one had secretly cut it with water. Grain was katharos when it had been winnowed, thrown against the wind until the chaff blew away, and what fell back to the floor was wheat and only wheat. Do you hear what the word is actually about? It has almost nothing to do with being spotless. It means unmixed. One substance, the same thing all the way through. So, run the sentence again with the real word in it. Blessed are the unmixed in heart. Blessed is the man who is only one man. Blessed is the woman whose inside and outside are the same person, whose motives are not cut with something else, who does not have a secret formula. That is what Jesus is blessing. Integrity in its oldest sense, from the same root as the word integer, a whole number, not a fraction, a heart that is not divided into departments with different agendas. And once you see that, you see what the real contaminant is. And it is not what the purity sermons said. The deadliest impurity of the heart is not desire. It is audience. It is the second motive that sneaks into everything. The hidden camera we perform for. You can give to charity with a mixed heart. 1 part, compassion. 3 parts, hoping someone notices. You can pray out loud with a mixed heart. And Jesus knew it. Because a few minutes later, in this same sermon, he warns about men who love praying on street corners to be seen by others. Same act, same words, 2 different substances. And God, like any honest merchant, can taste the water in the wine. The question Katharos asks is not, did you do the right thing? It asks, who was it for? We live in the golden age of the mixed heart. No generation in history has had more tools for image management, more mirrors, more metrics, more daily opportunities to curate a self. The technology is new, the exhaustion is ancient. And here is why the divided heart cannot see God. Because this promise is not a threat. It is optics. Think about how seeing actually works between persons. You cannot truly see anyone while you are checking how you look to them. The friend who is composing his reply while you talk is not seeing you. The man at the party scanning over your shoulder for someone more useful is not seeing you. A divided heart always has one eye on the mirror. And a heart with one eye on the mirror has only one eye left for God. And God does not come into focus for half an eye. The simplest, the pure in heart, see God for the simplest reason imaginable. They are finally looking with everything they have. The promise is not that God will show up. The promise is that you will finally be able to look. So the sixth demand. And for the four-version man, it may be the hardest demand of all. Become one person again. Let God into the one in the morning room. The one place you have kept him out of. Because a heart with a locked room is still a divided heart, no matter how clean the other rooms are. Stop paying the crushing daily cost of running multiple selves. Fire the actor. And the promise, they shall see God. Measure the size of that. Moses, the meekest man on earth, once begged for exactly this on the mountain. Show me your glory. And heaven answered that no man could see God's face and live, and hid him in a rock and let him glimpse the trailing edge of glory as it passed. What Moses was denied on Sinai, Jesus hands to the unmixed heart on a grassy hill, without ceremony, in a single sentence. One small detail, and by now you know the routine. I will set it down and keep walking. The man who preached this blessing spent 3 years being surveilled by professionals. Scribes shadowed him. Informants baited him with trick questions in public, hoping to peel a gap open between what he said and what he was. 3 years of hostile fact-checking by the sharpest legal minds of his nation. And when they finally dragged him to trial and needed testimony against him, the record says something remarkable in its smallness. They had to go out and hire false witnesses. They searched a public life of 3 years for one seam, one crack of daylight between the public man and the private man, and came back empty-handed. Leave it on the table. Keep moving to see God. It turns out we may first have to stop hiding from him. Now stand back and look at the road we have walked, because something is about to change direction. Empty hands, honest tears, the weapon laid down, the appetite recovered, the folder deleted, the actor fired, 6 blessings in, and every one of them has happened inside a single human chest. If the sermon ended here, it would be a beautiful private journey, a soul quietly rebuilt in secret. But the sermon does not end here. And the last 2 blessings do something none of the first 6 did. They open the front door, and they push this rebuilt person out of the house, into a world that is at war. And the first assignment is waiting at a dinner table in America, where a whole family has learned to eat around a minefield. There is a dinner table in America where certain words are live explosives, and everyone seated knows the map by heart. It is a nice table. The food is good. The house is warm. 3 generations around one spread, and running invisibly across the tablecloth are the fault lines, the topics this family can no longer survive. You know the list. Every American family now has one. The election, the vaccine. What happened with Uncle Dave? The thing their daughter posted last spring. Nobody wrote the treaty down, but everyone has signed it. We do not go there. So the meal stays in the safe zones. Weather and football and how the kids have grown. And watch the mother at the end of the table. Because she is doing skilled and invisible work. She steers every conversation like a minesweeper, feeling the ground ahead, redirecting her brother-in-law 2 sentences before he reaches the edge of a crater. Her pulse jumping every time the talk drifts toward a border. When the plates are cleared and the cars pull out of the driveway and nothing has exploded, she stands at the sink and exhales, and calls the evening a success. And everyone in that family would use the same word for what they have. They would call it peace. It is not peace. It is a ceasefire. And a ceasefire is more exhausting than peace ever was. Because a ceasefire has to be patrolled around the clock. Now carry that tired mother up the hillside. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Look closely at the word Jesus chose, because it is a compound built from 2 pieces, and the second piece changes everything. Erin is peace. Poio is a craftsman's verb. To make, to build, to fashion something that did not exist before. It is the root our word poet comes from. Jesus did not bless the peace lovers, and he did not bless the peacekeepers. Nearly everyone on earth loves peace. And keeping the peace usually means guarding a silence, patrolling a ceasefire, maintaining the minefield map. He blessed the peacemakers, the people who walk onto ground where peace does not exist and construct it there with their bare hands. The way a carpenter builds a table where there was no table. And underneath the Greek, the crowd on that hillside heard a bigger word still. The Hebrew word, their whole culture greeted each other with shalom. We translate it peace and lose most of it. Because shalom was never merely the absence of noise. Shalom means wholeness, completeness, every thread of the fabric rewoven, everything in the relationship mended and flourishing. Silence is what you have when the shooting stops. Shalom is what you have when the enemies eat at one table because they want to. By that standard, a quiet dinner full of unexploded ordnance is not shalom. It is just a very polite war. So let us be honest about the counterfeits. Because this blessing has several. The conflict avoider is not a peacemaker. He is a conflict investor, depositing every unresolved fight into an account where it compounds interest. And the account always comes due. The person who keeps things calm by letting an injustice stand is not making peace. He is doing maintenance on the wall. And the person who fires truth across the room like artillery, I'm just being honest. I just say it like it is. He is not a peacemaker either. Truth without love is a weapon. Love without truth is anesthesia. The peacemaker is the strange soul who carries both at once and walks into the middle. The middle, that is the address of this beatitude. And it is the most expensive real estate in any conflict. Because here is what they never tell you about standing between 2 sides. You take fire from both. Each camp assumes you secretly belong to the other. Come home to your family as the one who still talks to both brothers. And one side calls you disloyal, while the other calls you naive. In a divided country, and we live in one, the person who refuses to enlist is not admired by both armies. He is suspected by both armies. There is an entire industry in America right now. and it runs across every channel and every feed, whose business model is selling each side a nightly supply of outrage about the other. Rage is the product. Division is the distribution system. And in that economy, a peacemaker is something almost unpatriotic. He is a customer who stopped buying. So what does the work actually look like? Smaller and harder than a summit. It looks like listening to someone you disagree with until you can repeat their position back and watch them nod. That's it. That's what I believe. Before you say one word of your own. It looks like the phone call nobody in the family was willing to make. It looks like refusing to perform your opinions for your own side's applause. It looks like sitting with the brother and then the other brother. Absorbing suspicion from both. Holding a rope across a canyon while both cliffs question your motives. Peacemaking is bridge building. And every bridge gets walked on. That is what bridges are for. The seventh demand. Then, walk into the space everyone else is avoiding. Take the fire from both directions. Trade the ceasefire you can manage for the reconciliation you cannot control. And now the promise. And this one carries a logic the others did not. They shall be called children of God. Why that reward for this work? Why does the peacemaker, of all people, get the family name? Think about how anyone recognizes a child they have never met. You see the father in him. The walk, the build, the trade. He has his father's hands. People say, he does his father's work. And from the first pages of Scripture to the last, the work of this particular father has never changed. He crosses distances to repair broken things. He walks toward rebels while they are still rebels. Builds bridges toward people actively burning them. Moves first. Moves toward. Mends. Reconciliation is not one of God's hobbies. It is the family business. So when a human being steps into the fracture between two hostile parties and starts to mend, heaven looks down and sees an unmistakable family resemblance. People will call them children of God for the oldest reason in the world. They are out doing what their father does. One small detail. By now you could set it on the table yourself. The oldest and hardest wall of hostility in the ancient world ran between Jew and Gentile. Centuries thick, mortared with contempt on both sides. And a few decades after that hillside sermon, a letter went out to a city called Ephesus, making a claim nobody sane would invent. The wall was down, and the letter did not say, a treaty took it down. It pointed at one man and said, he himself is our peace. And it said, he made the two sides one, not by mediating from a safe distance, but by standing in the middle, in the crossfire, and absorbing into his own body everything both walls were made of. Set it down. One chapter of road left. Peacemakers are called children of God because they walk into broken places and do exactly what their Father does. But now follow this whole road to its logical end, because Jesus followed it, and he refused to lie to the crowd about where it goes. Add up the person these 7 blessings have been building. Empty-handed, honest about grief, disarmed, starving for what is right, merciful to enemies, oneself all the way through, standing in the middle of wars with a trowel in his hand. Become that person. Truly become him. And the world around you will eventually be forced into a decision. Because the world does not know what to do with someone it cannot bribe, scare, or recruit. And history has recorded, with terrible consistency, what the world usually decides. The 8th blessing is not one more item on the list. The eighth blessing is the bill for the first seven. And Jesus announces it with a shift in his voice so sharp that 1,000 people on a hillside suddenly realized he was no longer talking about someone else. Something happens to the sermon at the eighth blessing, and you can see it right there in the text if you slow down enough to look. The first 7 Beatitudes are each one sentence long, clean, compact, one line apiece, like bells struck once. Then Jesus reaches the eighth, and the pattern breaks. The blessing spills over. One sentence becomes 3. It is as if he arrives at this final one and cannot stop, as if there is more he has to say here than the form can hold. And inside that overflow, something else breaks. And this is the detail that should raise the hair on your arms. For 7 straight blessings, Jesus has been speaking in the third person. Blessed are they, blessed are those, the poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, all of them held at a describing distance. Categories of people. Portrait on a wall. Then the eighth blessing arrives, and the pronoun turns like a key in a lock. Blessed are you. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. They just became you. 1,000 people on a hillside felt that sentence swing around and point directly at them. He is not describing a type of person anymore. He is looking at the fishermen and the farmers and the women in the crowd, the actual faces in front of him, and telling them their own future. And he says it with the calm of a man who is not guessing. Now, before we walk one step further into this blessing, we have to build a fence. And I am going to build it carefully, because of all 8 Beatitudes. This is the one human beings abuse the most. Read the condition Jesus attached. Persecuted for righteousness' sake, because of me. The blessing has an address on it, and the address matters, because being opposed does not automatically mean you are righteous. People get criticized for being cruel and call it persecution. People get pushed back on for being dishonest, or careless with facts, or simply unwilling to listen. And they wrap the pushback around themselves like a martyr's robe, because the robe feels better than the mirror. And our era has perfected this move. There is a strange new comfort available in our century. On every side of every divide, and hear me, every side, the comfort of the victim badge, because the badge excuses you from ever asking whether some of the opposition you face might be earned. The 8th Beatitude does not hand out that badge. It asks a colder question first, and the question is this: are they against you because you resemble Jesus, or because you do not? Both roads lead to opposition. From the outside, the two can look identical. At the root, they could not be more different. And only one of them is blessed. With the fence built, walk through the gate, because on the other side of it stands a real promise for a real cost. And the cost, for most of the people watching this, will not look like a stadium full of lions. Here is what it will look like. An invitation that quietly stops coming. A group chat that goes on without you. A promotion that slides past you with a phrase attached, spoken in a room you were not in. He's great. He's just a little rigid about that stuff. A label that follows you down a hallway. The particular loneliness of being the one person in the meeting who would not sign off on the thing everyone else had made peace with. And nobody applauds, and nobody films it. And there is no soundtrack. Persecution in modern America rarely draws blood. It withdraws approval. Slowly, socially, expensively, and approval. For creatures wired like us is a kind of oxygen, which distills the eighth beatitude down to a question small enough to carry and heavy enough to stagger under. How long can you stay faithful once faithfulness stops paying? There was a man who lived that question all the way to the bottom, and his file is in your Bible. His name was Jeremiah. God handed him a message his nation did not want, and he delivered it, and his own people, not foreigners, his own countrymen, lowered him by ropes into an empty cistern, where he sank in the mud and was left to starve. His crime was saying what God said instead of what the king wanted said. And the detail that makes Jeremiah worth your trust is that he hated it. This was no grinning martyr. He cursed the day of his own birth. At one point, he made himself a promise. I will not mention him or speak any more in his name. He was done, resigning, out. And then he wrote down what happened next. And it is one of the rawest sentences in Scripture. But his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones, and I am weary of holding it in. And indeed, I cannot. That is what faithfulness under fire actually feels like from the inside. It is not the absence of fear, and it is not the enjoyment of pain. It is something in your bones that has grown larger than your fear, and will not let you put it down. Now come back to the hillside for the promise. Because Jesus attaches two things to this blessing, and both of them are astonishing. The first is the reward itself, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Stop. You have heard that exact sentence before. Tonight, at the very beginning of the road, it is the promise of the first beatitude, word for word, tense for tense. The poor in spirit and the persecuted receive the identical promise, and they are the only two blessings stamped in the present tense. Theirs is the kingdom, not will be, is. The first blessing and the last one are two ends of the same clasp, closing the chain into a circle. And the meaning of the circle is this: the person who begins the road with empty hands and the person who reaches the end of it paying full price are holding the same kingdom. The road is expensive. It is never unpaid. The second thing Jesus attaches is a command, and it might be the most unreasonable command in the entire Bible. Rejoice, he says, and be glad. The Greek word is agaliasthe, and it is stronger than glad. It means something close to leap. Exult, jump for joy. Understand what is being asked. Not joy instead of pain, and not joy about pain. Jesus never calls the insults pleasant or the loneliness sweet. The joy has a reason attached, and the reason is the strangest comfort ever offered. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Read that sentence slowly, because it is a genealogy. If you are paying this price for this reason, Jesus says, then look at the company you just joined. Jeremiah in the cistern. Elijah hunted through the desert. Every soul who ever held the line when holding it cost them everything. Your loneliness, it turns out, has a family tree. The world calls you isolated. Heaven has already filed you in a lineage. So, the eighth demand, the last one, the first seven, have been preparing you to afford. Stay faithful when the reward has not arrived, and might not arrive in this lifetime. Do not go hunting for the cost. There is no blessing on self-inflicted wounds. But when the cost comes to you honestly, because you would not abandon what is right, do not buy your way out with a betrayal. One small detail. You know the routine by now, and this is the last time we will do it. The man who preached this blessing walked every step of it himself. 3 years later, in the plainest, literal sense of every word he used on that hillside, insulted. He was mocked by soldiers wearing his blood, falsely accused. The court that condemned him had to hire witnesses because honest ones could not be found. Persecuted. He was executed outside the city wall. The death his scriptures called cursed. The last words of the Sermon on the Mountain and the hill outside Jerusalem are separated by 3 years of road. And they sit in a perfectly straight line. Hold that image. Do not set this one down, because we need it now. The 8th Beatitude asks the question the other 7 built you to answer. What will you do when becoming this person begins to cost you something real? And now there is only one thing left on the table. The 17th thing, promised in the first minutes of this story, hiding in plain sight the entire time. To see it, you do not have to climb anything. You only have to turn around and look back down the road you just walked. Turn around. Then, look back down the mountain, all the way to where we started. 8 blessings, 8 rooms. And this time, as you look back through each one, pay attention to something you may have half noticed and let go. In the corner of every frame, there was a man. In the chapter about the poor in spirit, we met a man who owned no pillow, who said, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests," but he had nowhere to lay his head, and who climbed a mountainside before every sunrise to ask his father for the day, like a beggar asking bread. In the chapter about the mourners, there was a man weeping openly at a friend's tomb. Tears with witnesses. Tears that made no sense. Because the miracle was already in his hands, and he cried anyway. In the chapter about the meek, there was the one place in all 4 Gospels where a man described his own heart. And out of every word in the language, the word he chose was praus. I am meek and lowly in heart. In the chapter about hunger, a man sat exhausted at a well in Samaria and told his confused friends, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me." Righteousness was not his obligation. It was his meal. In the chapter about mercy, a man prayed for the soldiers driving the nails. While they were driving them, "Father, forgive them." In the chapter about the pure in heart, a man was surveilled for 3 years by hostile professionals hunting for one crack between his public self and his private self. And the prosecution had to hire liars because the crack was never found. In the chapter about Peacemakers, a man made peace between the 2 oldest enemies on earth by standing in the middle and letting both walls collapse onto his own body. And in the chapter about the persecuted, a man walked the 8th blessing in the flat, literal sense of every syllable. Insulted, falsely accused, executed outside the wall. 8 chapters, 8 frames, the same man in every one. So now, finally, take up the question you have been carrying since the first minutes of this story. Why does he speak like a man who knows every one of these from the inside? You already know the answer. Because he does. The Beatitudes are a self-portrait. The man sitting on that hillside was not reading humanity, a list of entrance requirements. He was describing his own heart, blessing by blessing. And he was describing whether the crowd could see it yet or not. The exact road he himself was about to walk. Which means the mountain in Galilee and the hill outside Jerusalem were never 2 separate places. They are the first sentence and the last sentence of the same sermon. He opened it sitting on the grass. He finished it nailed to the wood, and every word in between he underlined with his own life. And that changes what the demands are. All 8 of them. When these blessings ask something of you, and they ask for everything, the voice doing the asking is not shouting down from a safe height. Every demand in this sermon has his footprints already on it. Put down the resume, says the man who owned nothing. Feel the grief, says the man who wept at the tomb. Lay down the weapon, says the man who never once swung his. Forgive, says the man who forgave with iron in his wrists. This was never a price of admission. Hear that clearly, because everything depends on it. The kingdom was handed to the poor in spirit in the present tense. In the first sentence, before a single demand was met, free, at the door. The demands are not what you pay to get in. They are what it costs to become like the one who paid. Grace opens the gate. The road makes you resemble him. So look at what the 8 blessings are actually building. Because it was never a list. It is a person, poor enough to receive, honest enough to mourn, strong enough not to crush, hungry enough to change, healed enough to release, whole enough to stop performing, brave enough to walk into the middle, and faithful enough to remain when obedience finally costs. That is not the life this world calls blessed. There is no hashtag for it, but according to the man on the mountain, it may be the only life that ever truly was. And maybe, somewhere in these 8 rooms, you found the one with your name on the door. Maybe you are still in the parked car outside the church, wearing the lobby face. And you have just discovered that the door you cannot walk through was never checking for a resume. Empty hands are the ticket. They always were. Maybe you are in week 3 after the funeral, and the world has run out of patience with your tears. Heaven has not. Heaven does not do deadlines. Heaven is not backing away from you. It is moving closer. Maybe your thumb is hovering over a send button tonight, holding a masterpiece of a reply. And the strongest thing you will do this year is delete it, with no applause, and let God keep the records. Maybe there is a folder on your phone, 4 years old and well-fed, and one text message, "I don't want it to be like this anymore," would cost you the whole case you have built, and buy back the brother. Maybe you are so tired, and you finally know why. Nobody can run 4 selves on one heart. You have permission to fire the actor. God has seen the one in the morning room already. And he is not the one who has been hiding. Maybe you are the mother at the sink after the minefield dinner, and you are done settling for ceasefires. And this year, for the first time, someone in that family is going to walk into the middle. It will probably be you. It usually is. And maybe this week, quietly, doing the right thing cost you something. An invitation, a friendship, a room's approval, and no one saw it. And no one clapped. One person saw it. He has walked that exact road, further down than you will ever have to go. And he calls you blessed, present tense, and he has already filed your name in a lineage that runs back through every soul who ever held the line. 8 demands, 8 promises, and the 17th thing, the thing the sermon was quietly building all along, is the person these blessings create. And that person has a face, and the face belongs to the one who preached them and then went out and lived them to the last letter. So here is what you do with the road now that you have walked it once. Do not try to swallow this whole. Take it the way it was built. 8 blessings, 8 weeks, 1 sentence per week. Read every morning, a few seconds, and then let it interrogate you for 7 days. Let the poverty question your resume. Let the mourning question your anesthetics. Let the meekness stand behind you while you type. Nobody is promising your life gets easier in 8 weeks. The man on the mountain never once promised easy. But 2 months from tonight, you will know whose face is slowly forming in yours. 2,000 years ago, a crowd climbed a hill expecting a declaration of war against an empire. And they heard 8 sentences nobody could clap for, because the sentences were not aimed at Rome. They were aimed at an older empire, a nearer one, better defended than anything the legions ever built. The empire of the self, seated on its little throne. In every chest on that hillside, Rome fell. The ruins sell tickets now. The 8 sentences are still standing. And tonight, somewhere past the noise, they are still laying siege to the last empire left. The gate they are knocking on is yours.